For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2116, the Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act, or the Crown Act as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2116, a bill to prohibit discrimination based on an individual's texture or style of hair.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act, or the Crown Act, is a critically important civil rights bill that would explicitly prohibit discrimination on the basis of hair texture or hairstyles commonly associated with a particular race or national origin. It would do so in areas of the law where discrimination on the basis of race or national origin is already prohibited, such as employment, education, and housing. To be clear, it is my view that existing civil rights statutes already make such hair-based discrimination unlawful. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission agrees, having issued guidance interpreting Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prohibit such discrimination as a form of race discrimination in certain circumstances. Unfortunately, some federal courts have erroneously rejected this interpretation. The Crown Act simply fixes these courts' misinterpretation of federal civil rights law, and this fix is urgently needed. According to a 2019 study conducted by the Joy Collective, Black people are disproportionately burdened by policies and practices in public places, including the workplace, that target profile or single them out for natural hairstyles, unquote, and other hairstyles traditionally associated with their race, like braids, locks, and twists. The study also found that 80% of Black women believed that they had to change their hair from its natural state to fit at the office, and that they were 83% more likely to be judged harshly because of their looks. While this study illustrates the prevalence of hair discrimination, it is the people behind those numbers that make this legislation so vital. For example, a Texas student was told that he would not be allowed to walk at graduation because his dreadlocks were too long. A Florida boy was turned away from his first day of school because his hair was too long. And a New Orleans area girl was sent home from school for wearing braids. Similarly, numerous Black employees have been told to change their hair because it violated their employer's dress code. Some have even been denied employment altogether because of their hairstyles. In view of these disturbing facts, 14 states have enacted statutes prohibiting discrimination on the basis of an individual's natural hairstyle, in every case with bipartisan support and sometimes even with the unanimous support of both parties. While I applaud these states for taking action, this is a matter of basic justice that demands a national solution by Congress. That's why I strongly support the Crown Act. The House passed a nearly identical measure last Congress, and I hope that we will do so again today. I thank the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman, for her leadership and for introducing this important bill this Congress. I urge all members to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, racial discrimination is wrong, it is un-American, and it is contrary to our ideals. Our federal civil rights laws recognize these facts. The laws are clear, and courts have been consistent that disparate treatment of one individual when compared to another cannot be based on race, color, or national origin. A person also cannot use a pretextual reason as cover for taking a discriminatory action prohibited by our civil rights laws. The Supreme Court settled that issue in 1973. As early as 1976, federal courts held that discrimination on the basis of hairstyle associated with a certain race or national origin may in fact constitute racial discrimination. In other words, under current law, if a person's hairstyle or hair texture is associated with the person's race or national origin and is used as a pretext for discrimination, that conduct is unlawful. These decades of precedent make the bill that we are debating today unnecessary and duplicative. In fact, the chairman of the committee just said that 3 minutes ago. The problem raised by the Democrats is one solved by enforcing our existing laws, not by making this conduct illegal for a second time. The Democrats may have recognized this fact if they'd have had real legislative hearings on this bill this Congress, but they didn't. And so the Judiciary Committee didn't have the opportunity to hear from experts about the legislation or how it comports with existing law. That is just one example of the deficient process that brought this bill to the floor today. At markup, Republican members of the Judiciary Committee raised multiple concerns about this bill's potential impact. For example, schools, employers, and other entities covered by federal civil rights laws may have race-neutral policies that everyone must follow. These policies are sometimes necessary to ensure an employee can adequately and safely do their job, such as a prohibition on hairstyles that could prevent a firefighter from properly wearing a respirator or a helmet. This bill, however, may jeopardize these policies because it creates a blanket prohibition on adverse treatment because of certain hairstyles or hair textures. These concerns and the Democrats' deficient process caused every Republican member to oppose this bill at markup. Instead of working to address these problems, the Democrats are bringing this bill, which was reported on a party line vote, to a vote under suspension of the rules. The Democrats are prioritizing this legislation, a bill to prohibit conduct already unlawful under our law, for political messaging reasons. This bill does not address any of the serious problems our country currently faces. Think about the crime problem, the 40-year high inflation problem, the 2 million illegal immigrants who've come across our border in 1 year's time alone, and of course not to mention the situation going on in Ukraine as we speak. I urge members to oppose this bill, and I reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you. Excuse me. Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the sponsor of this bill, the distinguished gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Watson-Coleman.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the chairman of our committee for allotting me this time to speak on a bill that I think is very important. Mr. Speaker, I do rise today to defend the right of Black people to exist as their authentic selves. 58 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, racial discrimination still runs rampant. For far too often, Black people, especially Black women and girls, are derided or deemed unprofessional simply because their hair does not conform to white beauty standards. Our natural hair is as innate a quality of Black people as the presence of melanin in our skin. Discriminating against our hair is no different than discriminating against the color of our skin. Hair discrimination forces Black people to choose between employment and existing authentically. Black women are 80% more likely to alter their hair to fit in at work. It is no different at school, where Black students are disproportionately suspended for unapproved hairstyles. Fortunately, with the support of groups like the Crown Coalition, state legislatures across the country have banned hair discrimination. State-level progress is an important step in the right direction, but it is not enough. And I reintroduced the Crown Act to end hair discrimination at the federal level. My bill would eliminate an undue burden that Black women face every day. The methods Black women use to manipulate their hair are not only costly and time-consuming, but also damaging to their hair. Nobody should have to sacrifice their time, their money, and the health of their hair for the sake of complying with racist standards of professionalism. Furthermore, the Crown Act is a necessary step toward protecting Black beauty and culture. Prohibiting hair discrimination is only the beginning. Even if this bill becomes law, we have a long road ahead toward a truly inclusive society. As members of Congress, we must pass legislation that promotes diversity over discrimination and inclusivity over intolerance. And through our work with other organizations like the Crown Coalition and the Screen Actors Guild, we can change the culture and build an America where everyone from our essential service workers to our most beloved television stars can live authentically. I'd like to thank those groups for doing everything in their power to raise awareness of this important but often ignored racial justice issue. The Crown Act is long overdue civil rights legislation. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will support it and send it to the President's desk without delay. No one should be forced to alter their appearance to be accepted. It's time that Congress recognizes that, and I do ask for their support. I thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
We reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the distinguished chairman, and I thank with deep appreciation to Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, and delighted to be an original co-sponsor. And I thank the Judiciary Committee for really standing for these issues that are uniquely engaged in the Constitution and equality and justice, but that would get no light of day had our chairman and our subcommittee chairpersons not thought that it was valuable and important. Let me say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, I'm very glad of their recitation of the civil rights laws, and they are right. They are extremely important in protecting the civil rights of those who have been infringed upon. But they're not perfect, and they're not perfect as evidenced by the continuous stark discrimination regarding hairstyles, particularly with African American women and others. And let me just say, Mr. Speaker, I realize that this is a tough business, but wear hairstyles such as what I wear, and note the social media calling you monkeys over and over again. And so it is not just the fact that you wear a style that could be called a crown. It is the advantage that others who want to racially divide, and you know who they do it to? Our children. And so it is evident that there is need for the Crown Act because it prevents the discrimination on the texture of hair or hairstyles commonly associated with a particular race or national origin in areas of the law where discrimination on the basis of race or national origin is already prohibited. But it is not precise. This law is precise. Black people are disproportionately burdened by policies and practices in public places, including the workplace, that target, profile, or single them out, but others are engaged as well. The Crown study found that black women's hair is more policed in the workplace, therefore contributing to a climate of group control. But I've seen cases as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, black women coming back from the Caribbean and their hair being searched or they're being targeted as having something in that hair. That is insulting, offensive, and it is not constitutional as it relates to equal justice under the law. The findings also say that 80% of black women believe that they had to change their hairstyle. But again, the young people who in the midst of their competition in the state of Texas, boys, girls, required to, in an outrageous manner, cut their dreadlocks before they could compete. How heartbreaking that is, how destroyed those children were. And the young man that had to go all the way to the federal court because he refused to cut his dreadlocks. Why should he? I'm very grateful that the military saw the outrage some years ago. 2014, Secretary Hagel indicated a review of military policies. The Marine Corps in 2015 followed suit and issued regulations to permit lock and twist hairstyles. And so it is, in fact, very crucial to know that it's Native Americans, it's men, it's women. This is our famous tennis player.
Gentlewoman's
it's all of
time
us.
has expired.
Simply say that the Crown Act.
Seconds.
Very grateful to the chairman. Thank you so very much. Again, this is an outstanding tennis player. This is a young man. These are styles that are neat and certainly acceptable. This is a Native American. Again, a black woman. And here is the ultimate insult. In my state, this young man had to, before he could compete, had to have his dreadlocks cut. The Crown Act is imperative, it is needed, and I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, it will not impact in any medical attention that you need because Crown Act is about hair, and hair does not impact in your medical needs. We need the Crown Act. I yield back.
Time has expired. Gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from
Mr.
New York.
Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady, to a member of the Judiciary Committee, the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Garcia.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the chairman and, of course, the sponsor of this bill. I'm Rice today in support and a proud sponsor of the Crown Act. Far too long, people with hairstyles or hair textures associated with their race or their nationality have faced discrimination. Yes, there's laws on the book, but it did not protect DeAndre Arnold, who was a senior at Barbers Hill High School in the Houston area. He was told to cut his dreadlocks in order to attend prom and his graduation ceremony. Imagine you work all those years because they tell you that you need to graduate, then he's told you've got to cut your dreadlocks. For DeAndre, his hairstyle was important to him because it was part of his Trinidadian culture and about who he is. This is wrong. It must never, ever happen again. The way that individuals choose to style their hair is a direct representation of their culture and of who they are. When individuals are told to alter, cut, or change their hairstyle, what they're really being told is to alter their culture and their being. This must end. I am proud to co-sponsor this bill, and I urge my colleagues here today to support it, to vote for it, and let's make this wrong a right. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the newest member of the House, the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Cherfilis McCormick.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise today to represent every person of African descent across this country and in Florida's 20 congressional district with natural hair. I call on my colleagues from the U.S. Senate to pass the Crown Act to prohibit discrimination on the basis of hair texture, hairstyle that is commonly associated with a particular race and national origin. Lawsuits initiated by Black workers alleging discrimination against their natural hair in the workplace have filled courthouses for more than 40 years. This legislation will provide us with the freedom to wear our crowns without discrimination. We must understand that hair discrimination is rooted in systemic racism. Anti-Black hair sentiments on U.S. soil has existed for centuries. As a member of Congress, we have a legal and ethical obligation to push back against the Eurocentric beauty perpetuated across TV and in the media. Hair discrimination is race discrimination. Unfortunately, some employers discriminate against people of African descent who wear natural hair even though employment policies involvement are not related to workers' ability to perform the job. The notion that some of these policies are race-neutral policies, therefore not covered under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which outlaws discrimination based on race, sex, color, religion, and national origin, is absurd and lacks merit. As a mother of African-American children, I want our beautiful daughters and sons in my district to feel comfortable in their skin without retaliation. Sadly, Black students are 3 to 6 times more likely to be suspended or expelled from school. And today, there remains regressive movements that continue to criminalize natural Black hairstyles under the auspices of preparing them for the real world. We must instead teach our children to embrace their natural beauty and understand that their humanity is not tied to their hair. To the organizations that have consistently advocated for the passage of this critical piece of legislation, we thank you for your commitment. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Ohio.
Reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just let me thank Bonnie Watson Coleman for her stewardship over this bill. I also want to thank Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, so many women who rose up to support this, not only this session, but last session as well. I want to thank State Representative Lakeisha Myers in my state, in the city of Milwaukee, for the ordinances and the bills that they have passed, which are similar to the Crown Act. Just let me say, with my short 2 minutes here, that my being instilled with low self-esteem started before I got to kindergarten, and it all revolved around my nappy hair and the way it just coiled. And 2 minutes is not long enough to carry you on this journey of what it's like to have your employers being told that you're making them look bad because of the way your hair looks, and having hot combs, lye, all chemicals being burned so that you could look white. And when I ran for office, this office in 2005, because I had so many pictures with my hair just, coiffed in a European style, my handlers wouldn't let me change it. And I mean, after 20 hours a day of campaigning every day, I had to figure out how to straighten my hair out. Thank God for the Crown Act. Thank God for being able to stand here under the e pluribus unum as my authentic, nappy-headed self. And I yield back.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Ohio.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. My great home state of Louisiana is where the Tian laws originated. These laws mandated that black women of Louisiana cover their beautiful hair, making it illegal to expose our hair. Imagine that. All Americans have the right to wear their hair that naturally grows out of their heads without fear. We as members of Congress must act to ban any discrimination against natural hair. Whether it's locks, curls, braids, or twists, black Americans have had the right to exist as their authentic selves and wear their natural hair with pride. The Crown Act would give and defend the right by prohibiting discrimination on the basis of hair texture or hairstyle in employment, education, and several other important spheres. This legislation has been heavily vetted and has already been passed in several states. I am proud to have authored and advanced the Crown Act as a member of the Louisiana State Senate, but not complete the process before I was elected to Congress. So this is particularly special for me. For the people of Louisiana and for people across the nation, federal action is needed. Studies show that some 80% of black women feel they have to change their hairstyles to simply fit in to the workplace. That natural hair is somehow unprofessional. This is unacceptable. I am calling on this chamber to do the right thing, that all elected officials stand up and do what is right by the people of America. This includes those who may not live in your district and those who have different life experiences. For the overwhelming majority of our country's existence, racial discrimination in its various forms have been legal. Today, we continue to move forward, to move this nation forward. Today, the House will vote to make discrimination based on hairstyles a thing of the past and make our workplaces more inclusive and truly free for people to express themselves. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from New York is prepared to close. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What is Congress doing today? What is the People's House under the Democrat majority? What is the House of Representatives up to today? Passing a bill to prohibit conduct that's already unlawful under the law. Discrimination based on hairstyle is already unlawful. That's what the Congress, that's what the House of Representatives is going to pass today. Think about it. That's the priority today when we have went in literally 1 year's time from a secure border to complete chaos. 2 million illegal crossings in 1 year on our border. In fact, we don't really have a border. We have went from safe streets to record crime in every major urban area in 1 year's time. And they're focused on a bill to make conduct that's already unlawful again, I guess. We've went from energy independence to the spectacle of the President of the United States begging OPEC to increase production. We went from stable prices to a 40-year high inflation rate. And Democrats are focused on this bill. This past summer, we had the debacle that was the exit from Afghanistan. And of course, as we speak, the Ukrainian people are fighting for their lives. And Democrats are passing a bill to prohibit conduct already unlawful under the federal law. A bill that says you can't discriminate based on hairstyle, which is already unlawful. We've had a year now where Democrats attack every liberty we enjoy under the First Amendment, every single one. There's still some places, some locations in America where a full congregation cannot meet on a Sunday morning. Some places where you still can't assemble, can't petition. The Democrats have kept the Capitol closed to the American people, their own darn Capitol. How are you supposed to come in and petition your member to redress your grievances if you're not even allowed in your Capitol, that your tax dollars pay for? And of course, we know what they've done to freedom of speech, the attacks there, but their focus today is on this bill. So I would urge a no vote. Let's focus on the issues that I think the vast majority of the American people want us to focus on, like crime, like the high inflation rate, the 40-year high inflation rate, like the border problem, like the fact that we were an energy independent country just a few months back. Let's focus on those issues. I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this legislation. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield the balance of our time back.
The gentleman yields the balance of his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Madam Speaker, while racism and discrimination sometimes appear in overt forms, they can also manifest themselves in more subtle ways. One way is through discrimination based on natural hairstyles and hair textures associated with people of a particular race or national origin. As we've discussed on this floor, this is intolerable, and it is not taken care of by current law, protestations from the other side notwithstanding. This Crown Act would make explicit that the civil rights laws prohibit such discrimination. It's a matter of basic fairness and justice. I urge all members to support this important legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2116? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Madam Speaker.
Because the gentleman from Ohio.
I'd ask for a roll call vote, Madam Speaker.
I'm sorry, sir.
I'd ask for a roll call.
Thank you. Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings are postponed.